Ukrainian forces are continuing their surprise assault into Russian territory into Kursk Oblast, and today appear to have threatened a second thrust into neighbouring Belgorod, where Russian officials have announced the evacuation of 11,000 people. We've seen Russian President Vladimir Putin speaking about this offensive today in a televised meeting with his security officials. The acting governor of Kursk Oblast, which sits across the border from Ukraine's Sumy province, has said that Ukraine's forces have advanced at least 7.5 miles into Russian territory, across a front at least 25 miles wide. Now that would give them roughly an area of control, an area of territory which Ukraine has seized of about 190 square miles. But other estimates, indeed estimates from the International Study of War, have suggested that some Ukrainian units have in fact advanced much further into Russian territory. The Ukrainian objective as yet remains unclear. It could be simply to distract Russian forces and to change the narrative of the war. And in that sense, they have already succeeded, because for the first time really since November, Ukrainian forces have seized the initiative on the battlefield. Ukraine are the ones advancing. Ukraine has taken Russia and indeed the world by surprise, forcing Moscow to redirect military strength away from other areas of the front line in a desperate scramble to try and reinforce the border guards and military that were present in Kursk before this offensive began 7 days ago. Vladimir Putin, in his comments today, was suggesting that this offensive is really about creating a bargaining chip, in strengthening Ukraine's hand ahead of any peace negotiations, effectively to try and seize some Russian territory, which it could then use in negotiations.
Главная задача стоит, безусловно, перед Министерством обороны. Выбить противника с наших территорий и совместно с пограничной службой обеспечить надежное прикрытие госграницы. Очевидным становится, что теперь ясно, что почему киевский режим отказывался от наших предложений вернуться к мирному плану урегулирования, так же, как и к предложениям заинтересованных и нейтральных посредников. Судя по всему, противник при помощи своих западных хозяев, он выполняет их волю, и руками украинцев Запад с нами воюет. Так вот, судя по всему, противник стремится к улучшению своих переговорных позиций в будущем. Но о каких переговорах вообще может идти речь с людьми, которые без разбора наносят удары по мирным людям, по гражданской инфраструктуре, либо пытаются создать угрозы для объектов ядерной энергетики? О чем с ними вообще можно говорить? Подобные акции, безусловно, преследуют главную военную цель, а именно остановить наступление наших войск по полному освобождению территории Луганской, Донецкой народных республик, территории Новороссии. И что? Что происходит на линии боевого соприкосновения? Каковы результаты? Темпы наступательных операций российских вооруженных сил, добровольцев, ветеранов не только не снизились, а наоборот увеличились. Увеличились в 1,5 раза. По всей линии боевого соприкосновения наши вооруженные силы продвигаются вперед. Противник, безусловно, получит достойный ответ, а все цели, стоящие перед нами, вне всяких сомнений, будут достигнуты.
But those negotiations at the moment remain a distant prospect. What is clear, by any stretch, this has been a shocking humiliation for Russia, an historic invasion, an assault on Russian soil by Ukrainian forces, the first time there's been any attack on this scale really since the Second World War.
А скільки він при?
Він сотню їде, ну.
Та там коробочку пробило.
Ну, керуйте, чи все саме? поремонтуєте і назад?
Russia, as we speak, still scrambling to try and contain that offensive. It does appear that the advances, the front lines appear to be stabilizing. It's unclear whether we'll see significant advances from that Ukrainian force, whether that Ukrainian force will remain in place, try and dig in, or whether they'll continue to expand the area under their control. We've seen President Zelensky of Ukraine acknowledging this assault. To begin with, Ukrainian officials remain very tight-lipped, really not discussing it at all.
Наших територіях, на тимчасово окупованих територіях, і також ситуацію не тільки на нашій території. Коротко я дам слово главкому Сирському. Будь ласка.
Пане президенте України, Верховний Головнокомандуючий Збройних сил України, продовжуємо проведення наступальної операції на території Курської області. На даний час під нашим контролем знаходиться близько 1000 квадратних кілометрів території Російської Федерації. У Белгороді військ виконують поставлені завдання. Бої йдуть фактично по всьому фронту. Ситуація знаходиться під нашим контролем.
The Russian officials, by contrast, being fairly candid about what was happening. And in many ways, that was a surprise because throughout the last 2.5 years, we've often seen Russian officials trying to downplay their own defeats, trying to shield their own people from the impacts of this war, which Vladimir Putin launched 2.5 years ago. Today, quite the opposite. We saw an admission from the acting governor of Kursk that some 28 Russian settlements are now in Ukrainian control. More than 100,000 people, he said, have already been evacuated. That figure is expected to rise upwards towards about 180,000 if the situation remains as it is. But of course, it could change very quickly. There was some speculation over the weekend that Ukraine's forces may in fact be trying to advance to capture a Russian nuclear power plant in Kursk Oblast. That remains at the moment beyond the territory they control. But again, that might have played into the suggestion that this is about creating a bargaining chip, may have played into suggestions this is about creating a diversion. The situation remains fluid. By the standards of the conflict, which has slowed down over recent months into this grinding attritional fight, this has been a real change of pace. And whatever comes next, it's fair to say that without doubt, Ukraine has changed the narrative, it has seized the initiative. And on those two fronts alone, this offensive can be counted as a success.